CIT 1124 Module 11 Switch Security Configuration. We don't have a video on Chapter 10 only because 10 and 11 kind of mold together, and what I found was that I think the cooler stuff is in 11, and my explanations are a little bit easier to follow than the obscure Chapter 10. So you go through them both, but 11 is a little bit more meaty and a little bit more easier to read. Let's take a look at the topics that we're going to see in this chapter. Implementing port security, mitigating VLAN attacks, mitigating DHCP attacks, mitigating ARP attacks, and mitigating STP attacks. Let's start with the first subsection 1. Implementing port security. The first thing you can do to make a port more secure is take a page out of the Cisco router book and just turn the interface off. By default, switch interfaces are turned on. Router interfaces are turned off. So on a router, you don't have to worry about shutting down interfaces you're not using because they're already turned off. But on a switch, all the interfaces are already turned on. So one of the first things you probably want to do is find all the interfaces that you've got on a switch that you're not currently using and go ahead and turn them down. Turn them down. Don't plug anything in. Or even if you have something plugged into them, go ahead and shut them down. That way, if someone just decides to plug into a port someplace, the interface is programmatically turned off at the switch, and they're not going to get any further than that. So that's a good start. The second thing you can do is you can start implementing port security. Now, another default about switching ports is they're set to dynamic auto, which means if you have a trunk on one switch and you set it and you connect it to a port on another switch, it's going to be in dynamic auto, which means that trunk link will come up. So to reverse that process and make it more secure, we're going to use the command switch port security. Now, if you look at the bottom, and this is what this slide is getting into here, this is kind of cool. If you just drop that command in by default on an interface, it's going to fail. What you have to do is set the interface into access mode first. So remember, access mode is for interfaces that are supposed to be connected to just PCs or printers or just access devices, not other switches. So it's the end destination for the cable. It's going to find a host on the other side. So when you set port security up, though, you got to make sure that that interface is in access mode already. So switch port mode access, then switch port security. Once we've added some port security, some of the things that we can do, we can take a look here at what's going on with this port security slide. And once again, we've got some bigger information here, kind of gold copy. So port security is enabled. It's got a maximum MAC address count of 1, which means it's going to utilize the first MAC address that it picks up. It's only going to keep one MAC address in its CAM table for this particular interface. So if it's got a MAC address that's posted already and somebody unplugs that and plugs in another one, what's going to happen if it violates that maximum MAC address of 2, it's going to go ahead and shut down that port. And you can see in gold there the violation mode for shutting down. And we'll get deeper into that in a future slide, but it's kind of a cool slide. Next slide gets into specifics of what you can do on a port. So there are really 4 parameters that we can set. 1 is for aging, 2 is for MAC addresses, 3 is for maximum number of MAC addresses, 4 is violation. What's going to happen if we cross the threshold of one of the first 3 transactions, aging MAC address or maximum. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. We've got them in order. Aging is first. Aging on a port, we're going to go ahead and age out a MAC address on a port in one of 2 ways, either in an absolute method or in an inactivity method. In an absolute method, just says this, that you've got X number of seconds for an interface to be on a port, and after it's aged out, it's just going to get deleted after that period of time. Inactivity says this, we're going to leave it there, but if it's inactive for a period of time, we'll delete it after that inactive period of time. No big deal there. So aging on a port is a way that we can rotate MAC addresses. Showing port security, and this is just an example of showing the aging here on this type. Aging time, 10 minutes, type inactivity. Inactive for 10 minutes, we're going to go ahead and drop that MAC address off that particular port value, okay? After aging, we get into limit and learn MAC addresses. So when we get into the MAC addresses, we can manually configure a MAC address into a switch port. Switch port security MAC address, and then that would be a MAC address that would be allowed on that particular switch port. This would be a high security location that would pick up from. By default, what we're going to do is we're just going to dynamically learn our MAC addresses. If switch port security is turned on, we're going to get down into really where number 3 is at, where we can say, okay, well, we happen to know for sure that the first device that we plug into this interface is the device that we want to use on this interface. And instead of memorizing the MAC address and going in and manually configuring it, what we're going to do is we're going to use the keyword sticky on that, and it's going to stick to the port once you turn it up. So if the device, a host, is connected into a switch port, that switch port's going to memorize that MAC address, and it's going to stick to it, and then you'll have to follow your rules of maximum number of ports after that. So sticky's pretty cool. Sticky says, we're definitely sure that on our profile right now, everything is the way that it's supposed to be. The devices have their own MAC addresses. We're going to go ahead and plug everything in. We're going to set them as sticky. We don't have to then type those in. We don't have to manually configure those MAC addresses on those interfaces. And the next slide gets into what do you do if you cross the threshold of a violation. So switch port security violation, you got your 3 options here: shut down, restrict, and protect. Pretty self-explanatory as far as what's going to happen on shutdown. Restrict and protect, a little bit different. Port will drop the packets with unknown MAC sources on protect. Restrict is going to go ahead and drop packets with the unknown source addresses until you remove the sufficient number of secure MAC addresses to drop below the maximum value. Woo! So keep those things in mind. Those are important things as far as what you can do to keep your tables in check and your switches safe. The last piece in this section is show port security address, and you can see the MAC addresses that are assigned to interfaces.